With the return to our old friends at Evil Geniuses and their
amazing,
latest round of shenanigans.
Do you know my favorite part about this as soon as I saw it, Monty? Because sadly, I've realized I should really stop complaining about this aspect that no one else remembers the context. And it's like, that's actually why I'm essential to the scene. Like, why am I actually trying to encourage other people to take my spot? So what I'll say is this, I'll do the Thorin thing. What you need to remember, the key framing, guys, when you see this information that Evil Geniuses is probably losing their entire team, is remember, Evil Geniuses, when Danny situation told you they're one of those like player-focused orgs. They told you, by the way, the last 2 years that the whole thing in League of Legends was about Jojo and Danny. It was all about building those two guys up, and that this was like showing, by the way, they've mainly done this in CSGO, but they even brag in CSGO about how they've built a talent pipeline that like transports talent up through. Well, the problem is if you do all that, Monty, you can't then go, right, well, we had one bad split, fire everyone. What, including those guys that you said were like the entire investment of the org and we're all our pride and joy? Yeah, fire them too. Like, that doesn't make sense. Now, look, we all get why, because obviously everyone's tightening their belt like a motherfucker right now in the LCS. We all know that. That's all well and good. Like, all I'll say, by the way, I will just throw that one out there. It's just a little sort of like a sanity check for people on Reddit. You know, when they're all losing their mind, like, oh my God, Vulcan's a genius. He's going to LEC. Like, yeah, there's no fucking money in LCS, guys. So, you know what I mean? Like, at this point in time, it's actually starting to even up. Like, now you get to live in Europe, you know, like, fucking, there's a million reasons why it might be worth it now, you know. I don't imagine there's the bidding war there used to be, because obviously, if people don't know, because that's a tied-in connection, because we're going to talk about that in a minute, I'm sure. The reason why that's more significant to me isn't the fact that Vulcan's chosen it, Monty. It's that we've talked on the past 2 years of shows that literally Vulcan is one of like 4 players that decide the entire offseason of League of Legends every time he's available. Yep. So that's the bigger deal. The bigger canary in the coal mine, guys, is one of those guys, a guy that essentially, like, by the way, if he'd been still available, like a Danny or a Jojo, who would be worth their weight in gold. They're the ones choosing to move region. That's what I'd be more worried about.
Well, I mean, it makes total sense. As we're aware, as you say, like the only reason that a lot of these players were sticking around North America in the first place was because of the paychecks. That was the big draw. So if the scene is going to dry up in terms of money, it makes sense that there's going to be a reverse exodus because people want to play in a more competitive league. Like if the money's equal, you know, maybe you play on a top 3 LCS teams just so you can get to Worlds or, you know, potentially MSI if you're top 2, right? And so there is an attraction to that if you're going to be on a better LCS roster. But EG was clearly suffering from a lot of the drama from, you know, they underperformed. And if you as a player are thinking, well, this situation is not likely to get better and I'm also not going to get paid money, the interesting thing is perhaps there would have been an opportunity for him at FlyQuest, you would have to think, given the support situation over there. So I have to admit, like, I'm a little bit surprised because it's not like FlyQuest isn't spending money, but perhaps he got a very good deal out of Europe. There's also the rumors that he's going to Heretics, which would reunite him with Peter Dunn, which may have been a big part of the deal for him, although I can only imagine that he wouldn't be too down on working with the reigning world champion head coach either. So I'm not sure the coach was necessarily the biggest factor in that decision. Perhaps he just didn't want to be on a team
if you notice,
he would have a Korean speaking, you know, lane mate.
It does feel like a lot of the people who played for Peter Dunn either have very like affectionate feelings towards him or just think he's a really good coach. Like I don't think I've ever seen anyone dispute that or diss him or anything. So makes sense he want to reunite, right?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. And so, yeah, I guess I'm not surprised. And it seems like, especially because Vulcan is one of the best North American player, as you alluded to earlier, his movements often did decide the entire rosters of other teams, because getting a player of his caliber locked in as an American resident was a huge part of the way the dominoes fall in the LCS when it comes to jamming teams in the offseason. So him not being here is actually going to be quite big. And also, it may be a harbinger of things to come.
Yep.
If other players are going to be moving over to Europe to try and be more competitive, we may just see a consolidation of talent in the European region outside of the top couple of teams in the LCS. Like, we could see LCS really becoming like a 2 or 3 team league where those teams just kind of dumpster everybody.
Basically what the LMS was for all those years.
Right.
So it'll be. It makes sense, right? There'll be a couple of teams have all the money, like Cloud9 team. Like they'll get the big names. But yeah, the rest of the league probably shouldn't be that competitive. It's just logical, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably very good for FlyQuest, which is a team that seems to be willing to spend right now. Potentially, like you say, Liquid or C9, depending on their appetite for spending at the current time. But those
Oh,
teams,
Monty, you know what I've just realized? This is actually nuts as well. This is how you know that this company was supposed to be advertising League of Legends. Think about it, guys. Liquid IV, but look at the way like IV's written like the Roman numeral for four. Team Liquid fourth.
the
That's some
memes.
old school law for you right there, boys. That's old
That's
school.
great.
Yeah.
I knew we were going to make that joke at some
It's all
point in
good.
time.
It's all
I was
good.
waiting for it.
By the way, there's even a couple of like side reasons that might throw people off as to why specifically like Vulcan would potentially do this. One, because of the teams he played on. He's played with loads of Europeans as well. Think about like Perk, Sven, fucking Niski,
Yep.
who was
I mean,
obviously the most
Niski
recent
tweeted
team.
a picture of him in Europe with him at breakfast the other day.
Inspired. In fact, there's another angle as well. Here's actually a very subtle reason people might not realize. If people don't know, Vulcan is from NA, but he is literally from Quebec, the French-speaking part of Canada.
French.
I assume he even A would want to speak like well, he can speak French to Niski, etc. Obviously, and then B, if you're in Europe, like it is like more of that vibe anyway. I don't think he'd be as put off. I think the problem is this: if the classic ones like the doubleths of the world, some of them might have some silly ideas about what Europe is and think it's all weird. I always thought they should have gone as well, Monty. Like, in my opinion, and the same way as we always said, like. Bjergsen and Jensen should have done like 1 year in LEC just to see. I always thought like someone like Doublelift should have done 1 year just to see like if it was a different vibe or if he could have gotten a cool team that when he did a deep worlds run, you know. So to me, I think it's just a slam dunk for Vulcan. Yeah, it sounds like a great move. The only downside is this, Monty. It's the destination I'm not as a big fan of. If the story went like this, because he worked with Perks just called up him now and he said, let's make the super team, come over to Vitality. Now I'd be if it's like Johnny Heretics, it's like so now it's Yankos and him. Brilliant. Brilliant. So we'll see about that one. We'll see about that one.
I mean, look, I think Heretics can probably make some pretty good moves. Like, obviously, with Yankos, they have somebody to build around at the very least. You'd have to think that they're making a top lane move, given how things went last season. And if they make a support change as well, I don't know if this team is necessarily so trash anymore, right?
The problem is, though, that's the one downside of Peter Dunn teams is I don't know if he's that harsh though in terms of the cuts. Like, do you actually believe he'll make those cuts? Because the problem is he seems like the kind of guy to me who just like believes in people and like gives you extra chances. So we'll see. We'll see on that one. I'll be interested to see whether they do make cuts or not. Yeah, I do think the solo lane scenario is untenable. I
think Ruby already announced that he's been allowed to look for other teams. So we'll just have to wait and see how the GMing plays out. It seems like there's
especially because mid is surely the easiest position to replace. Come on, guys. I mean, Leader showed you that there just is talent in Europe for mid lane. Come on, you don't have to have an import for that role, do you?
So yeah, back to EG though. So what they're doing, guys, I know we briefly alluded to it, but we didn't say it, is the rumor is that they are dropping their entire roster except maybe JoJo. So that means that Someday, Inspired, FBI, and Vulcan are all gone, and we'll see if JoJo sticks around. You would think possibly 100 Thieves would be very interested in JoJo PN, given that they just lost Bjergsen. So this is, I mean, I am shocked that they are capable of dropping these contracts halfway through the season without having to pay them out. I mean, I'd love to know what the clauses are when it comes to breaking those deals.
That seems so suspicious because, like, from my history of seeing contracts, Monty, you can tell me if it's similar for you. Usually, they don't actually try to build loads of crazy clauses in because actually most people naively just go into it hoping it'll all work out and everyone will keep playing the whole time. Usually, they're not actually like the companies could be way more evil how they frame them. You know, like all that stuff I reported about Excel. The whole point was that was stuff that wasn't in the contract, Monty. That was them trying to like enforce things just through social pressure. It wasn't really on the pip, like, and then you can be fired after a month. Like, no, obviously not. And also, you know this. Look, it's not as bad as Germany, but California labor laws are pretty half decent too. Like, they definitely don't let you just mess around and just fire people for no reason. In fact, the whole thing I'm pointing out about the Evil Geniuses org, if you remember, Monty, with their execs and actual employee people, was they had a track record of trying to use the like for cause angle and say that's why they fired you. So I'm amazed actually that this is even happening on this. I would have expected it more like TSM, like they'd try and slash the payments or something, or just keep 3 people and then make some bullshit pivot on why they were changing. But the idea they fire everyone except that's just wild, isn't it? I mean, what if it's everyone?
So there's several possibilities that could be happening here. First off, there could have been a termination clause in the contract that could have been performance based. Now they probably have to pay some sort of fee. They probably have to pay some sort of fee if they terminate the contracts. It could have not been performance related. It could have just been, hey, we pay you X% of the contract or X dollars if we terminate your contract early.
Golden handshake or whatever.
Yeah.
Severance
And the other
package or
thing,
whatever.
the other thing that could have happened is the players could have voluntarily released themselves from their contract. If EG was like, hey, so here's the deal. We are going to, we are going to invoke the termination clause, or you can try and get to a different team, right? Or we're going to keep you around and we'll allow you to explore options. But if you start exploring options and you get signed to another team, then we're not paying you the termination clause. So everything is kind of up in the air right now.
Technically, it wouldn't be the first time that an active LCS player on their roster had told them during the season that he wanted to no longer play for them anymore. So, oh, sorry. Do you need some like little peon like bellhop to tell you that to confirm what I just said? Oh, sorry. Keep going. Yeah, go on, keep going. Sorry, this is working. I'm sort of getting back in. It's all good. It's all British.
I know you're reviving. You're reviving. I'm watching it in real time. I do think that it's outrageous, though, that as a cost-cutting measure, remember that nobody from the management has been fired yet for all of the bullshit that they've done. And by the way, guys, this is not the end of that. There is more reporting that is going to be coming out about all this stuff with EG. So you're going to see more. It's pretty wild. And nobody has actually been fired. I mean, they haven't taken anybody out of the management. Instead, what they have done is they have basically moved all of their esports teams to dumpster tier status. They have gone budget on Dota, gotten rid of their legacy Dota team. They have horrifically mishandled their Counter-Strike team. Now they're going budget on League of Legends. And with that, without a Monster sponsorship, what does this team have left at this point in time? They have, I'll tell you what they have.
Maybe someone in fighting games or something. That'd be about it, right? It can't be anything else, surely.
I'll tell you what, they have one very famous streamer named Danny, who in the last 30 days has streamed 6 times to an average of 290 viewers. Remember that they are paying him to be part of the creator collective because they did nothing wrong. Remember, they did nothing wrong. They are very magnanimously moving him into a streamer position. And surely with his 290 average viewers, he's going to be in an absolutely excellent position to secure new sponsorships for Evil Geniuses. He will save the entire war.
I mean, the real joke there, by the way, is you could even argue theoretically, Monte, if they're paying Danny out the terms of his contract, which is what was implied, and all the healthcare stuff that he needs as well, and this creator collective thing, you could even imply that by keeping him and doing that as like a we're sorry approach, that might have cost them another real LCS starter player that could be playing right now and winning them games. That's what a fucking clown show this is, mate. Because think about that salary has to go somewhere. Like,
I mean, look, here's the other thing. I financially agree with EG's decisions. If you just think about what the shape of the team is right now, they're not going to get any new sponsors. Yeah, they're not going to get any new sponsors. Partially because the only people getting new sponsors in esports right now are Last Free Nation, but also partially because if you were going to sponsor an esports team, why would it be the one with this enormous amount of baggage around it, where people actively dislike them, where they know that the management has done all of these shady things, and they lost their biggest sponsor that they had a partnership with for a decade. So it's a really bad look. It's a really bad look for them. I guess maybe Chevron will save them in the end. I can't imagine like what that sponsorship is supposed to do for them. And it's amazing to me that some of their existing sponsors have even stuck with them for this amount of time. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know where this org goes right now, but it just continues to fall apart.
As you said, though, we won't say any more, but just watch this space. There will be more news to come in the future about Evil Genius and some of their shenanigans. Because all I'll say is this, right? Normally, when you investigate a case, so for example, I should investigate that Excel case, what you tend to find, Monty, is more like there are a few aggrieved parties who may well have been completely fucked, but then the rest of the people who weren't involved are often just like, oh, I wasn't involved in that, or I haven't had the same problem, right? What you actually found that was crazy with the Evil Geniuses one is like when I started digging into it, as you can see, essentially the sweater never stopped unraveling. It just kept going and
Yes.
kept going.
Everybody wanted to talk,
Yeah,
guys.
eventually I just had to publish it. But at this point in time, there were people coming forward to it. It's like they weren't involved in the Danny situation. It was just like there was some other fucked up things how they behaved, and you should see what they do internally. And I was like, look, that's all well and good. And keep sending the info, but I can't put that in this story. So essentially, yeah, the EG one, I'm pretty sure that my read on that whole situation is those top exec people, like the Nicole LaPointe Jameson people, they are the asshole where they just treated everyone with a similar level of disdain. And you know that famous thing people say sometimes, Monty, that when you one of the red flags if you meet someone, it's like a dating tip, is if they treat people who are sort of like socially below them, like a waiter or something like a valet. If they treat those people like trash for no reason, that's a massive red flag that they'll essentially treat you like trash if they don't follow you. That's the vibe I've got basically in this org. Like these people who've been doing this to pro players in LCS, also just did it to everyone, just did it to all the bloody staff and all the bit, and had the same power games and tried the same outrageous stuff. And the problem they have is this: that would probably never come to light if it wasn't obviously for the big player angle that everyone's interested in with Danny in. But that's it, mate. Now that that's happened, that was the fucking stopper. Now that's off, it's all coming out. So just, I don't know what the timing will be, but it'll all come out eventually, guys. Don't worry. It will all come to light.
Yeah, I also forgot about their Valorant partnership slot that they received, by the way, through cronyism, guys. It's not because Evil Geniuses was a good Valorant team. Remember that Evil Geniuses got a slot.
They were irrelevant in Valorant.
And Optic did not get a slot.
If people don't know, Optic was the best team over the whole of the last year. Meanwhile, Evil Geniuses was irrelevant.
Also, you compare the Optic fan base and brand to Evil Geniuses.
Yeah.
I mean, Optic is getting hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube videos and is huge, and EG gets 200 views on a video. So the only explanation there is like pure cronyism, why Evil Geniuses was selected by Riot. And even now in VCT Americas, they are second to last place, 1-4 in the standings, doing absolutely horrifically. So they don't
there's
have
also
any
that implication,
success.
like if people don't know, obviously as Monty's pointed out, on merit, Optic obviously should have been one of the teams, and even historically, the esports org obviously has a lot of success and tenure and fan base. So that's why people speculated, if everyone doesn't remember, that it was something like the management maybe they didn't like, or if you remember, there was obviously the past involvement of Optic with LCS where they fucked around and it became Immortals, then it went out. And if people don't know, that a lot of people that didn't sit well with. Spoiler, there's a reason I think also why certain other teams didn't get anywhere LCS, but have maybe fucked them. So all I'll say is this: in the end, I know Hastro felt like he'd been fucked by Riot. Well, what did he expect? Fiddled Castro, whatever. We'll workshop that one. There's something there. We'll go back to that. We'll circle back later on.
I do know that there were rumors that I have heard also, and I think it's pretty likely that they didn't do a good job with their initial application for partnership.
Could well be.
But they did actually, I know later on they did fix it and like do a proper application, but Riot was still salty over the original one. So even though they gave them the one that Riot wanted eventually, like very quickly after the first one, Riot was still very mad at them. So decided in a petty manner to reject them. So, yep, that's a classic Riot right there. So yeah, that's it's always interesting to hear about the current EG scenario and what's going on. It is outrageous to think that they signed all of these players before the season, that the core of this roster was a championship core that was likely disrupted. If their competitive success was disrupted by the sickness, the COVID that they had towards the end of the season, but B, was probably enormously disrupted by all of the drama caused by the management's treatment of Danny and the management's other shenanigans, especially on social media. And as we know, within the EG facility. So instead of getting rid of the distraction, you get rid of the players instead and go with some sort of insane budget roster. So it's really shameful.
Also, by the way, the reason why I find it so interesting is because this is where the damage was done from that Danny story, mate. If that Danny story never happened, the way people would be framing this now would be like, we're losing one of the best teams. Like, what happened? Like, EG was one of our best LCS orgs. And Nicole Point Jameson, just because she checks all these boxes, is one of the best people to ever work in esports. And she's trying to change things and all that. Because you know the worst thing about the EG org is they were one of those inverted orgs. They actually flexed that they were the socially conscious ones. They were the ones who understood the modern day of esports, was obviously that's all just bollocks, isn't it? So now no one really gives a fuck. I don't think anyone really cares about EG now, unfortunately, mate. In fact, that's the saddest thing about them losing the roster. Like, even though this lineup definitely mad underperformed, the core of it still looked like it could be a really good team. Like, I thought, you change one or two pieces in, you got a potential champion again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if you have to make any kind of roster changes. You just have to have a more stable environment. Like, I don't think that the roster was the main issue with EG. The players just seemed off compared to where they were previously, and there were many plausible explanations for that. I mean, you also got rid of the coach in between seasons. Like, you got rid of the coach that got you a championship. So it's been a slow and sad dismantling of this roster that I find very disappointing. And at the end of the day, is going to make the LCS a significantly less competitive
the obvious
region.
problem, Monte. I know where they fucked up. They didn't understand. Yes, obviously, we all want to use freeze technology. They brought in freeze to be their coach, and people don't know. But it takes an hour for the freeze in the freeze pipe, in the actual freezer, before it can cool the smoke. So obviously, he could have been a really great coach, but it takes 1 hour. An LCS game's about 30 minutes, guys. Think it through. Think it through, EG. So,
see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.